I'm back with another video. This is a rather special video that I've been wanting to make since I've already discussed it with a few of my friends. If you've been watching my album review series for some time, you know that I'm a fan of Bush. In fact, I've been a fan of their music for some time. So much so that I have every studio album they've ever made, as you can see here. You'll even notice I even have Distort Yourself from Institute, as well as Gavin Rossdale's solo album, Wanderlust, right there. I've listened to these albums dozens of times. I reviewed every single one of them. However, there is one thing in particular that I've noticed about them. Almost every single one of them has received mixed reviews from critics. It's one thing if one or two of these albums got mixed reviews, but for some reason, almost every one of them has gotten mixed reviews. And I've been trying to find out why this is. Although Bush have been very successful in America, they haven't been quite as successful in their home country of England. They sold over 20 million albums worldwide, and half of which were sold in the US. They've mostly been in the realm of post-grunge, but have also ventured into other genres, including grunge, new wave, hard rock, and alternative rock. Apparently a lot of critics have compared Bush's sound to that of Nirvana, which is understandable considering the fact that Nirvana is one of the bands that Bush took influence from. Granted, there are other artists that Bush have taken influence from, including Soundgarden, David Bowie, The Beatles, Bob Dylan, Jane's Addiction, Tom Petty, Smashing Pumpkins, Led Zeppelin, and Sonic Youth, among others. Bush were originally together from 1992 to 2002. They reunited in 2010, but with a different lineup. They are still together at the time of me making this video. Now, I'm going to go over the albums that Bush had made, and we'll discuss what the critics think. First up, we gotta start with Bush's debut album, 16 Stone. This is the first album and had been released on December 6, 1994 under Trauma and Interscope, despite having been recorded in January of the same year. Now, my copy was made in 2004, and it was released under Kirkland Records. Now, the album was self-produced with the help of Alan Winstanley and Clive Langer. It was an immediate success, selling over 6 million copies, and it's being certified 6 times platinum by the RIAA. When it comes to what the critics think, reception is mostly positive. A review from Q compared Bush's sound to that of Stone Temple Pilots, while AllMusic praised this album while simultaneously comparing the sound to Pearl Jam and Nirvana. The Guardian, on the other hand, only gave this album 2 out of 5 stars. Obviously, The Guardian doesn't get it. May of 2014 was when Loudwire placed this album at number 8 on their list of the 10 best hard rock albums of '94. July of that same year was when Guitar World included this album on their list of the 50 iconic albums that defined '94. It's weird to see that most of the critics appreciate this album, and I personally think it's the best album that Bush did with the original lineup. Let's set this aside for now. Now we move on to Bush's second album, Razorblade Suitcase. This album came out on November 19, 96 under Trauma and Interscope. What's special about this album is that Steve Albini produced it, and he's the guy who produced In Utero for Nirvana 3 years earlier. He would later go on to work on The Fragile from 9 Inch Nails. Anyways, this album was successful by selling over 293,000 copies in just the first week. It ended up selling over 3 million copies and was certified 3 times platinum by the RIAA. It's also the only Bush album to peak at number 11 on the Billboard 200. When it comes to critical reception, this is where Bush's material started receiving mostly mixed reviews from critics. I read that some claim that Bush tried distancing themselves from the grunge bands such as Pearl Jam and Nirvana in terms of sound. Overall, those dumbass critics mostly gave the album mixed to negative reviews, which means that they just don't get it. However, there was a change in the sound when comparing this to Bush's first album, but that doesn't make it a bad album if you ask me. Granted, the sound is more downbeat, while Bush's first album was more upbeat in terms of tone. Although this is my least favorite of Bush's studio albums, I still enjoy it for what it is. And next we get to Deconstructed. This was just a remix album that a lot of people seem kind of forget exists. It was released under Trauma and Interscope and had various producers working with it. And I know that this album peaked at number 36 on the Billboard 200, though I don't know how many copies were sold. As for critical reception, I can see why this album got mixed reviews. I have reviewed this album before, and I wasn't really a fan of it. In my review, I mentioned that it wasn't Bush's fault that this album was a failure. So I blamed the artist who remixed the songs. A friend of mine said that Bush doesn't really need to do remix albums. And I don't really care for remix albums in general. I know that Fear Factory's remix album, Remanufacture, was well received, but that's a different story. Now on to the next album. Now the next album we're going to talk about is The Science of Things. So it's Bush's third studio album, and it was released on October 26, 1999 under Trauma and Interscope. The album was produced by Gavin Rossdale along with Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley, who just happened to be the same guys who produced Bush's first album. The album was still successful by selling over 1 million copies and being certified platinum by the RIAA. The album peaked at number 11 on the Billboard 200. As for critical reception, it was still mixed, but better than Razorblade Suitcase. Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic seems to be the only critic to actually give this album a positive review. So this album is better than Razorblade Suitcase. But he still said the album has, quote, lack of emotional or non-musical substance to make a lasting impact, though he gave the album 3 out of 5 stars. Karen Schomer of Rolling Stone, on the other hand, gave this album 2 out of 5 stars while bashing it. She claims that the album, quote, sounds exactly like the records that came before. Let me tell you one thing, that's a complete fucking lie, because I have listened to Bush's albums dozens of times, and they each seem to have a slightly different style to them. Obviously, Karen Schomer can't be taken seriously because her name is Karen, so I don't necessarily need to go into detail as to why she's a bitch. Also, Rolling Stone magazine is a total shit show when it comes to publications. Although this album has a different sound compared to Bush's first 2 albums, I personally think it's better than Razorblade Suitcase. Now we get to Bush's fourth studio album, Golden State. This album came out on October 23rd, 2001 under Atlantic Records, so Bush switched to a different label this time around. The 20th anniversary edition of this album is coming up, and I'm going to do a video about that. Anyways, this album was self-produced with the help of Dave Sardy. This album peaked at number 22 on the Billboard 200, but I don't know how many copies were sold. If anyone knows, be sure to let me know in the comments section. Critical reception was mostly positive this time around, since the album has a 63 out of 100 on Metacritic. I read that Kerrang claimed that this is Bush's best album. Although that statement is debatable, it's great to see that they appreciate this album. Now, Jenny Alescu of Rolling Stone obviously wasn't a fan and gave this album 2 out of 5 stars. Obviously, she doesn't get it, and Rolling Stone magazine fucking sucks. Personally, I think this album is very well made, and I think it's better than Bush's previous 2 albums. Although it's not quite as good as 16 Stone, I still appreciate it for what it is, since this album is mostly in the realm of hard rock. It's also the last Bush album released with the band's original lineup, and their last album before splitting up in 2002. I guess they wanted to part ways on a high note. Now we're going to take a detour to talk about Destroy Yourself from Institute. Institute was more of a side project that Gavin Rossdale was the lead singer/rhythm guitarist for, even though this band was only together from 2004 to 2006. Now, this album came out on September 13th, 2005 under Interscope, and was produced by Paige Hamilton, lead singer of Helmet. However, Bulletproof Skin and Save the Robots were produced by Gavin Rossdale. This album is mostly in the realm of hard rock, but with some elements of alternative rock and post-grunge. This album wasn't hugely successful since it peaked at number 84 on the Billboard 200, only sold out 12,000 copies in the first week. In total, it sold over 54,000 copies. Critical reception was mostly mixed. Read that Stephen Thomas, Erlewine of AllMusic, seemed to like this album for the most part, even though he gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Alex Marriott of punknews.org really enjoyed this album, gave it 4 out of 5 stars. As for Caroline Sullivan of The Guardian, he only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Alex Lay of Contact Music and Vic Bansal of Music didn't like this album either. But we know those 3 are full of shit. I actually really enjoyed this album, even though there wasn't any more material from Institute that would come after this. It sounds somewhat like Bush, but with a heavier sound. A friend of mine hopes that Institute will have a reunion someday, but that's unlikely to happen since Bush reunited in 2010, and are still making new material to this day. It's possible that Bush may play some Institute songs during live shows, but we'll have to wait and see. Take another detour to focus on Gavin Rossdale's solo album, Wanderlust, which came out on June 3rd, 2008 under Interscope. It was produced by Bob Rock, who later produced two of Bush's albums, but we'll get back to that. Now, this album debuted at number 23 on the Billboard, debuted at number 33 on the Billboard 200. I couldn't find anything on how many copies were sold. Hopefully someone in the comments can notify me. Anyways, this album was mostly met with mixed reviews from critics. Michael Rothman of Consequence of Sound claimed this album sounds similar to Nickelback, which I disagree with because it doesn't sound anything like Nickelback. If anything, this album is infinitely better than Nickelback has ever put out. Notice that 411 Mania, Entertainment Weekly, and Los Angeles Times were the only critics who actually liked this album. This means that they actually get it, while the other critics are full of shit. As for my opinion on it, I actually enjoyed this album. Gavin seems to have gone for a different style this time around, and the style is very different compared to that of Bush and Institute. I don't know if he's going to do another solo album, but we'll know if he makes an announcement. 2010 was when Bush officially reunited of the different lineup. It makes this lineup difference that Chris Traynor is the lead guitarist and Corey Britz is the bassist, leaving Gavin Rossdale and Robin Goodrich as the only original members from the original lineup. Nigel Pulsford and Dave Parsons have since moved on to other projects. Now, September 13th, 2011 was when The Sea of Memories was released under Zuma Rock Records, E1 and Ear One Music as Bush's comeback album, and their first studio album in nearly a decade. It was produced by Bob Rock. This wouldn't be the last time he'd work with Bush. This album peaked at number 18 on the Billboard 200 and sold over 20,000 copies within the first week in America. However, critical reception was mostly mixed for some bullshit reason. IGN, RockFreaks.net, and LoveItLoud.com seem to be the only critics who had the decency to praise this album, while the others are right in the middle. And the critics who didn't like this album are just a bunch of bitch-ass hipsters who just don't get it. I personally think this is Bush's best album, and it was a great way for them to make a comeback. I'm also considering this album for a future video on the best albums of the 2010s, so look out for that. Now, moving on, we're going to discuss Man on the Run. So it's Bush's 6th studio album and was released on October 21st, 2014 under Zuma Rock. Though Sony Music was the distributor. Gavin Rossdale served the role of executive producer, while Nick Raskulinecz produced the majority of the songs. But the rest were produced by James Baumgartner, who also did the mixing. The album peaked at number 33 on the Billboard 200. Critical reception was mostly mixed, but there was some positive feedback from audio Electica, and soundtrack 411. So those people actually get it. The other critics seem to be, the other critics just place it right in the middle in terms of quality. Now, I actually really enjoyed this album. It has a heavier sound than Bush's previous work, and Nick Raskulinecz happens to be my favorite music producer. The next album we'll discuss is Black and White Rainbows. This album came out on March 10th, 2017 under Zuma Rock and Caroline Records. It is produced and mixed almost entirely by Gavin Rossdale, though Bob Rock co-produced the song The Beat of Your Heart. John Ewing Jr. helped Gavin with the mixing. Not sure exactly how many copies were sold, but I know that this album peaked at number 21 on the US independent albums. Just like with most of Bush's material, it got mixed reviews from critics. ABC News, of all people, gave this album 4 out of 5 stars, so it's great to see that they understand that Bush actually have talent. The other critic reviews range from mixed to negative. Listening to this album, there are some elements of pop rock this time around. Though I know that Foo Fighters, Weezer, and Linkin Park have also incorporated elements of pop into their music around this time. Not saying that's a problem or anything. First, I think this album isn't as good as most of Bush's other albums, but still better than Razorblade Suitcase, and especially Deconstructed. This will also be the last Bush album to feature Robin Goodrich, who ended up leaving the band in 2019, leaving Gavin as the only original member who is still with Bush. Now we get to Live in Tampa. Now this is a live album that came out on October 24th, 2020 under Cleopatra Records. It was produced and executive produced by Barry Summers, and it was directed by Milton Lage. Of course, the second comes with a Blu-ray, a DVD, and a CD of the performance. Now, I'm not sure exactly how the critics responded to this album, but most of the people who checked this album out seem to like it. Of course, I mentioned in my review that I actually attended the concert where this was recorded. Granted, this album was essentially an appetizer for Bush's next studio album, The Kingdom, which I will be discussing shortly. Now, the last album we'll be discussing is The Kingdom. This is Bush's most recent album at the time of me making this video. It was released on July 17th, 2020 under BMG. Gavin Rossdale produced this album with the help of Tyler Bates. Now, Eric Grant produced a few of the songs. Not sure exactly how well this album did commercially in the US, but it did peak at number 4 on the UK rock and metal albums, and number 14 on the UK independent albums. Critical reception was mostly mixed, since this album has a 57 out of 100 on Metacritic. Neil Z, Young of AllMusic, Macy Bennett of American Songwriter, and Entertainment Focus all praised this album. Paul Travers of Kerrang gave it 3 out of 5 stars, which is better than what Corey Grow of Rolling Stone gave, since that fucking hipster only gave it 1 out of 5 stars. And actually 1.5 out of 5 stars. Now, douchebags like Corey Grow are exactly why nobody takes Rolling Stone magazine seriously anymore. Now, as for my opinion on this album, I see this as being some of Bush's best material yet. It's also the heaviest album that they've ever done. I've included on my list of the top 8 best albums of 2020. Although Nick Hughes joined Bush in 2019 as their new drummer, he only performs on 2 of the songs on this album, The Kingdom and Flowers on a Grave. The other songs feature Gil Sharon on drums. This is still an amazing album overall. Now, that's all the albums that Gavin Rossdale has worked on at the time of me making this video. He's also been featured on a few songs from Blue Man Group, Apocalyptica, and Santana, but I've never actually heard those songs. Long story short, there are some critics who have praised Bush, and I commend them for that. As for the critics who have been bullshitting these guys, they just don't get it. In fact, most of Gavin's material has gotten mixed reviews, which doesn't make any sense. He's a very talented guy, and Bush have toured with Stone Temple Pilots on multiple occasions. Hell, Gavin is even friends with the guys from System of a Down, and even appeared in a live stream that System of a Down did back in January of 2020, where they were raising money for their Armenia fund. Gavin also sang with Linkin Park during a memorial concert in memory of Chester Bennington on October 27th, 2017. Another interesting fact is that Gavin showed up to the premiere of John Wick Chapter 3 in 2019. And it's fucking awesome seeing him right next to Keanu Reeves. I mean, Keanu is John Wick, and Bush's song Bullet Holes was played during the credits of the movie. I actually made a joke about this photo, saying that Gavin probably doesn't mind the fact that Keanu has mercilessly slaughtered hundreds of dickheads in the John Wick movies. It's still awesome seeing these two legends beside each other, and it's great to know that Lionsgate knows that Bush had talent, which is probably why they were brought in to do a song for John Wick 3. In the end, Gavin Rossdale does not deserve to be shit on. He deserves respect and admiration for all the effort and hard work he puts into his music. I'd like to thank the critics who have been praising his material, and I also like to thank his fans for supporting him. I mentioned to a few of my friends that there's a slim chance that the original lineup of Bush would have a reunion, but we'll have to wait and see if that ever happens. Anyways, this video ended up being longer than I expected, and I hope it was worth your time. Now's the part where I question you. What do you think of Gavin Rossdale's music? What's your favorite album or song that he's worked on? Have you seen Bush perform live? Is the criticism that Gavin usually gets really justified? Should more people give his music a chance? Do you think the original lineup of Bush will have a reunion? Let me know in the comments. If you like the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to hit the notification bell to notify future uploads. And to watch, I'll be back soon with another video.